dementia.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very vicious disease, and it does what it does.
Mm-hmm. We may look different and live in different countries, yet our stories are knitted with the same threads of excitement, uncertainties, challenges, and victories. As we journey through the ups and downs of life, it is our undeniable will and God's strength that propel us to joy after pain, smile after frowns, and ups after downs. We were born to win. We were destined to greatness. We are overcomers. Welcome to God Scoops Raw and Unedited Stories. Welcome to Raw and Unedited Stories, the place where stories are told to uplift, encourage, and to brighten your day. Today we have a lovely woman of God who is a caretaker to her mother. She's here to tell her story. Welcome, Renee, to
Good morning.
Raw and
Thank you.
Unedited Stories on God's Scoop. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am great. Can't
Good.
wait to hear your story. But before you start your story, tell our audience where you're from, just a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here, and I'm anxious to share my story, and hopefully, it'll be a blessing to someone else. My name is Renee Connell, and I'm from New Jersey in the United States. And I am a mom, a grandmom. Um, I work full time. As a hobby, I sing and I do different plays and shows just as a hobby. And in the midst of all of that, I became a caregiver for my mother.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, talk to our audience about your story.
Okay. Well, my story began several years ago, and it started out because my mother had broken her hip. And up until that point, she was well into her late 70s, maybe early 80s. She had been living independently, living alone, doing her own thing, traveling, doing whatever she felt like doing. But one day she fell and she injured her hip. And after that, my sisters and I were concerned about her being older, getting older, and living alone. And so at the time, I was the best option because I had a spare bedroom. So she came and lived with me, and she recuperated very well from the broken hip and was able to resume all normal activities. And she was in her early 80s at the time. And so she was more like a roommate. I wasn't really providing much care, just a little care at the time. My mother did have dementia, but it was very mild at the time, and the doctor had prescribed a medication that worked very well for her. So she was able to be home alone when I went to work. She was able to go to adult daycare, which adult daycare is it's a facility for senior citizens where they go and they have activities to keep their mind active. And the particular one she went to was for people with dementia. So they were, mindful of keeping her busy, and she enjoyed doing that. And I even would go when they would have family activities. I'd go and we'd do arts and crafts and things together. So it was nice. But as the years went on, she began to change and her health began to decline, and she needed more help and more assistance with things, and it wasn't such a good idea to have her alone, because one thing, when a person has dementia, it can affect their balance. So when it began to affect her balance, they always advise you to remove little throw rugs and things that you may have, like your bath mat or your doormat, or if you have a hallway runner, any type of anything on the floor, because then they could trip over it. Any person that has an issue with balance. So that was pretty much the first phase, just being cautious with her surroundings so that she wouldn't trip and fall again. So that was pretty much the first phase. And I would have a friend or neighbor come and keep her company while I was at work. So they didn't have many duties. They were just there to keep her company. Then, as the years went by, and her health began to decline a little more, then I became more of a caregiver. Ultimately, after 5 or 6 years, it was a slow process. But after 5 or 6 years, she was at the point where she actually needed someone with skills. She needed an aide. So an aide would be with her while I worked. But when I was home, I would have to assist with her daily activities like bathing, feeding, grooming, everything that you normally do for yourself when you're living with someone with dementia. Ultimately, you end up doing those things for that person. And you have no idea what you're getting into until you're in the midst of it. There's information that you could read about what to expect, but every case with dementia, every case is different, and every person's needs are different. They're pretty much the same, but they're at different phases. So you
Mm-hmm.
never know which phase your loved one is going to be on.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one day I'm giving my mother a shower, and she said to me, "I never thought my daughter would have to clean my bottom." And it didn't even occur to me, because I had gotten so used to taking care of her, to giving her shower. It was just a daily activity. If the aide didn't do it during the day, or on the weekends I was home, I was definitely doing all the, her bathing and things on the weekend. Um, but everything that you do for yourself, shampooing a person's hair, trimming their nails, trimming their toenails, you have to check their body. I had to check her body for bruises or um, moles or anything unusual that would take place with her skin. And there were times where her skin would change, and she developed a rash. And
Um,
she developed a rash because she didn't the bra was uncomfortable for her, but she was top heavy.
mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that if you're top heavy and you go too long without wearing a bra, there's no air circulating. So since there was
Mm-hmm.
no air circulating, she developed a rash. So that had to be treated. So then sometimes you become a nurse. So
Re-
you have to give medication. You have to
um,
apply the
Re-
ointment.
Renee, I just going to interject a little bit here, and
Mhm.
I just want to say what a marvelous opportunity you were plunged into to take care of mama. So what I really want to ask you before you continue, did you have any formal training before you got into the business of caretaking for mommy?
No, no formal training.
So talk to us about how you learned all the skills that you're telling me and how to do it. Because I know your story is very important. It's paramount to so many people who are taking care of their parent
Hmm.
and they don't know how to, they don't know where to start. Some people just give up and put them in a nursing home and you know. So
Hmm.
you took the time to learn these skills. Talk to us about that.
There are resources available. Some things I learned online, believe it or not. Um, but because she had dementia, the Alzheimer's Association has a lot of information. There's people you can call them, they can give you advice over the phone. Um, well, this was during COVID. When my mother got bad, it was like during COVID. So I wasn't working. So I was home I was 24 hours a day for those 2 to 3 years when COVID hit. So so they didn't come to the house, but under normal circumstances, they could send a counselor could come and explain to you what to do and how to do it. There's an organization that's in my community, a very lovely lady from my church. Her name is Connie Pizarro, and she has a company called Oasis. So through Oasis, I got a lot of information. So I took advantage of the resources because it can be very isolating. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I realized when we were home 24 hours, it was different when I was going to work and different people were coming in to assist her. And I didn't have the 24-hour duty until weekends. But during COVID, it was all day, every day, plus working from home. And it can be very isolating because the more dependent they get on you, the less time you have for yourself, the less time you have to even go and get groceries or go get their medication. So it can be very isolating. So I had to reach out. I reached out to different organizations. I found out what was available in my surrounding community, and I took advantage of those resources. And that's how I learned different things. And some things you just learn because I had kids. You know,
Right, right,
I mean, like the
right.
grooming. I mean, I had to groom my kids, so it's basically doing
Yeah.
that. But mentioning kids, people say taking care of the elderly is like taking care of children, and
Mm-hmm.
it truly is not, because children
Yes.
become independent over time, and the
Mm-hmm.
elderly become more dependent over time.
Right. Because I remember the term that says once a man, twice a child.
Twice the child, and
And
the need is great when you know when that happens. The need is great.
yes. Talk a little bit to us about the impact it had on you as a person as you take care of your elderly mother.
It was challenging. But I tell you, the most important thing you need for anybody that's taking care of anyone, whether it's an adult or a child, if you're taking care of someone that is ill, you have to you have to pray. You have to pray, and you have to believe that God will give you the strength to get through it. Because I found myself doing things I never imagined that I would be doing. So I know it was God that got me through it. And God placed people in my life. Like I said, there are resources. I took advantage of those resources. God placed the right people at the right time. But I did have to be active, proactive, and seek them out. I also was taught by some of the people that I reached out the importance of self care, because you cannot help somebody else if you're burnt out, if you're
Mm-hmm.
depressed, if you're exhausted, if you're feeling isolated and lonely. You have to reach out. If you're not a big, if they don't have a lot of resources where you live,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of information on YouTube, a lot of how tos on YouTube. There
Mm-hmm.
are um, there are groups on Facebook, caregiver
Right.
support groups, right on Facebook, and some of those support groups, some of them are just for a person to vent. Sometimes somebody just needs someone to talk to that understands what they're going through. And I found a group like that right on Facebook. So they weren't skilled people giving advice, they were just talking to each other. You know, oh, I had a bad night, my loved one didn't sleep, and I had to stay up all night. And then the next person will chime in, oh, I had that problem too, and this is what I did. And so that's simple thing like Facebook. And but getting back to self-care, it's very important that you take care of yourself, that you have your
Yeah.
quiet time, you have your prayer time. If you're a believer, you got to have your prayer time.
Mm-hmm.
I had to come to the realization that with dementia,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very vicious disease, and it does what it does,
Mm-hmm.
meaning you can't prevent it.
Right.
No matter how much you love the person, you can't love it away.
Mm-hmm.
You can't prevent it from happening. So I know I had a feeling of like I always had to be there, I always had to do everything, but you have to realize you're not stopping the disease when you do that. And
Right.
you're not helping them, you're not helping yourself.
Right. And I thank you that you mentioned that because I was just about to talk to you about the challenges, the everyday challenges a person with dementia
Mhm.
do. or experience, or some of the things they do. Let's talk about those challenges.
Um, a perfect example, ultimately, after many years, my mother got to the point where she wasn't really sure who I was.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that I would, whoever I was, that I would take care of her, but she wasn't sure if I was her daughter. Sometimes I was her daughter, sometimes I wasn't. She moved in with me, and so my place is situated that the bedrooms are across the hall from each other. So, if when my siblings would come over, my I have sisters, and if they would come to visit mom, or even if the caregiver was here or whatever, and sometimes if she was looking for me, she'd go, "Where's that lady across the hall?" And that was me. I was the lady across the hall. One weekend, my sister traded places with me. She's like, "You go away for the weekend, and I'll stay with mom." And I went away for the weekend, and my sister said the whole weekend, she's like, "Where's the lady from across the hall?" She just was looking for the lady from across the hall the whole weekend. Not realizing that I was her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can you?
that's difficult. That's
Mm-hmm.
difficult knowing that they don't know who you are. But my spirit kept telling me, in her spirit, she knows who you are. She may not know your name, or whether or not you're her daughter or her son or her grandchild, whatever the case may be for your scenario. But deep down inside, I believe that spirit still knows that connection, because
Yes.
she knew I was someone that would take care of her or give her medication if she needed medication. So, but she didn't know my name.
Right. And I'm sure because you know it is a disease, then you didn't take it personally. But talk to us about some of our other mood swings.
Sometimes she'd be totally normal, and she'd know everybody and everything, and then sometimes she'd be confused.
Hmm. Talk,
She'd be
talk to us about
confused.
her moods, though. Does she go on high where she's extremely happy and another time she's sad? Is she crying? Talk to us about some of those challenges if that happens.
In her case, it didn't happen, and it didn't happen often. But what would happen was she would get these spells where it looked like she was having a stroke. She
Mm-hmm.
couldn't talk. She couldn't get her words out. And and on those times I would have to call, 911. They would come, they would take her to the hospital, she'd be evaluated, and then they wouldn't find anything. It was not a stroke. It was the dementia. And each time they were happening more and more often. In the beginning, it might happen once a year. Then it began maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And they began to progress until, in her case, ultimately, she passed away in August 11th last year, August 11th, 22. She passed away. And it was one of those attacks that had happened where she was home. She couldn't talk. She was
Mm-hmm.
disoriented, and they took her to the hospital. And from there, she went to rehab. And from rehab, she came back home. And ultimately, she was on hospice. But it was that type of episode that she was having. I know there are cases where sometimes they'll wander off, or sometimes they'll fight, because sometimes they don't recognize themselves in the mirror, and they're frightened because they don't know who that person in the mirror is. I know that happens, but that didn't happen to her, with dementia. I do have another relative that, has Alzheimer's, and they have different symptoms. They both affect memory, but with dementia, in my mother's case, with her dementia, there were days where she'd come back clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were days where she'd come and knock on my door and say, "Are you my daughter?" And then
Mm-hmm.
and who's this other lady? And I said, "Well, I'm your youngest daughter. She's your oldest daughter."
Mm-hmm.
She's like, she's the oldest, she's my daughter, so she would be very confused. But the other relative that has Alzheimer's, the difference is with Alzheimer's, what they lose, they don't get it back.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the Alzheimer's, there's like shrinkage in areas of the brain, and once that area isn't working anymore, it doesn't come back.
Um, Renee, before we close the session, because we're in for the sake of time, I want you to tell our audience how satisfying it was to take care of your mother during her time of illness. How satisfying it was. What were the rewards?
The rewards were knowing that I did the best that I could, that we, the family, did the best that we could. We gave her the best that we could give her. Um, we took advantage of every resource that we possibly could to assist her, to make sure she was comfortable. She had a lot of needs. She had a lot of medication. She had an oxygen machine. She had a nebulizer because she had emphysema. She had a lot of medical conditions that, but we were able to manage everything at home, and that's not for everybody. It's so important to know that it's not for everybody to be a caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are but if you can, do it as long as you can. And
Mm-hmm.
if because the reward is knowing that you did, by the grace of God, you did the best that you could do.
And that's profound. That's profound. You did the best for your parents, what you could do. And that's what God asked us to do. Take care of
Hmm.
our parents when they are in need, when they get to that stage when they can't take care of themselves. That is very, very important. Thank you for being that wonderful caregiver. And before we close the session, I want you to talk to those people who are experiencing the same. I know of many people who are taking care of their aging parents. Talk to them about some of the things that they need to do and some of the things that they need to avoid.
Okay. First of all, if you're not sure if your loved one has dementia, but you're noticing changes in their behavior, where they're forgetful, they're defensive about being forgetful, they're argumentative, they're just not the person they used to be, they're not engaging in conversations around them, they're not able to keep track of what's happening on their favorite TV shows. Sometimes, and I learned this from the Alzheimer Foundation, sometimes it's just hearing loss and not dementia at all. So the first step is, if your loved one has these strange symptoms, get that hearing test and make sure it's not hearing related. Because when you lose the hearing, the part of the brain that controls hearing starts to die. So that part of the brain stops to function, because hearing voices, hearing music, hearing different sounds keeps the brain alert. So if the hearing is gone, the brain is going to start going to sleep because it's not hearing. So that would be the first step. I
Mhm.
did do that eventually once I found out that's what you're supposed to do. So I would say make that the first step. Then if after you're done with the hearing, a neurologist. Have your loved one evaluated by a neurologist to see if you're dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, or just age related issues. Some things are just age related, where the brain just isn't as sharp. And then the next thing I would say you need to do, if it is dementia or Alzheimer's, reach out. Get on that computer and find out what organizations are in your community, what's available to help you. If there's nothing in your area, then I'd say go to um, a support group through Facebook, because there's so much available online. We can Zoom everything. So you can attend group counseling right without leaving your home, right on your computer, right on your telephone. Get that group counseling. Self care is important. You must care for your loved one, but realize you cannot cure them. You cannot heal them. You cannot stop the progress of the disease. So, neglecting yourself is not going to save them or help them. So, you need to take care of yourself, get your rest, eat properly, exercise, get your quiet time, your prayer time, your meditation time, whatever it is you do that. Do that for yourself. Keep yourself healthy. And then the healthier you are and the more like yourself that you feel, the better you are when you approach your loved one, because they're going to be cranky and they're going to have bad days and they're going to have tantrums, and you don't want to respond with that same energy, that same negative energy. If you can take care of yourself, and keep yourself in a good mood. That good mood can be contagious. You can put them in a good mood. Playing games with them helps. Bingo. My mother loved playing bingo. Even if she didn't know anything else, she knew how to play bingo.
Yes.
Arts and crafts, simple thing like a coloring book, activities to keep your loved one occupied and keep their mind active. Keep music on. Music keeps the mind active, and music is soothing. You know,
Yes.
a funny thing I used to do. If we were watching TV and a commercial came on with a nice jingle, I'd jump up and start dancing, and she'd laugh and she'd say, "Oh, what are you dancing for?" Little things just to make her laugh, little silly things that I would do.
Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned music because I was going to ask you about that. And I understand you're also a singer and you must have sang your way through those challenges.
Many a
Can
day.
you can you grace us with before we end this session, grace us with something, something.
Something. Okay. I would say my scripture that helped to see me through is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And as a song, and I used to sing it in church when I was much younger, but I'll sing that song. Uh, uh, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Oh, I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing such valid, pertinent story at such a time as this with our audience. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in to Raw and Unedited Stories. Thank you for those who have subscribed already and those who have not. Now is the time to do so we can have many stories like these. And if you have a story to share, leave your information in the description box and we will contact you. And remember to click the notification bell when you share, like, and leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you. And you have yourself a phenomenal day.